Story recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain an action, horror, mystery film called The Bad Batch. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. In an unknown barren wasteland in the post-apocalyptic United States, a PA system announcement addresses USRCS employees to avoid prolonged physical contact with Bad Batch inmates and limit their eye contact with them for no longer than 10 seconds. Arlen Mae Johnson, an average-looking juvenile teenage girl, steps inside and receives a tattoo on her neck, just behind the right side of her ear, bearing the letters BB 5040 tagging her as Bad Batch 50-40. On that same day, 2 prison guards escort Arlen to an unknown desolate area where they detain all the Bad Batch inmates. The guards quickly lock the gates behind her, and she suddenly finds herself in the middle of a vast, dry, and barren wasteland. With nowhere else to go, she grabs her water container, straps on her backpack, and starts walking. Along the way, she finds an interesting pamphlet that reads, "Find the dream and find comfort." She then soon finds an abandoned car, which she thinks is strange. Feeling exhausted, she seeks refuge inside it. Moments later, Arlen notices a rumbling sound from an oncoming vehicle and checks the rearview mirror, where she sees 2 people in a golf caddy moving towards her. Arlen tries to escape, but the enslavers manage to capture her just as she starts running. Arlen wakes up and finds herself tied in chains and gagged. She then tries to look for someone who could help her, but as she looks at the surroundings, she instead discovers that she is in some odd community. She sees shelters made from debris and people behaving strangely than normal. One of her captors approaches her. As her captor reaches for her hand, Arlen struggles to resist, but amidst her solid resisting effort, the captor triumphantly administers some anesthetic into her arm. Seconds later, Arlen feels a tingling sensation on her fingers and suddenly feels dizzy, almost losing her consciousness again. Her captor draws out a hacksaw and cuts through her arm without hesitation. She hysterically screams as her captor is amputating her arm. Though the anesthetic suppresses the sensation of pain, she cries as she loses her arm permanently, and after which her right leg follows. Arlen now fully understands that she is inside a strange, terrifying community of cannibals. After spending several days and nights in the cannibal community as a captive, Arlen has unceasingly been hearing agonizing screams from other neighboring captives. Despite her traumatic condition, she brilliantly devises a plan to escape. The following day, Arlen covers herself up with her feces, hoping that her captor will unchain her from the walls. True enough, after seeing her state, the captor unchains her and drags her outside to wash her. As the captor fetches a bucket of water, Arlen quickly snatches a 2-foot-long metal bar lying on the ground and hides it behind her back. She times for the right opportunity to strike, and within seconds, Arlen brings her captor unconsciously down to the ground. Using the same metal bar, she unceasingly pounds her captor's head. After making sure that her captor is dead, Arlen crawls around to look for something to help her escape. She sees an old box full of scraps, immediately digs on it, and fortunately finds an old skateboard that she can use. She then rides it with her back and finally manages to escape the community. A few moments after her escape, under the scorching heat of the sun, the thirst for water consummately takes its toll, and she loses her willpower to move further. Then a shabby wanderer, with a shopping cart filled with scraps suddenly appears and approaches her. Sensing her vulnerability, the man takes her to a new community called The Comfort. 5 months later, Arlen moves on with her new life and becomes a permanent resident of the community. With her new prosthetics installed, living in a brand new and friendlier community has never been easier. There is an existing economy inside The Comfort where people have jobs, others run their businesses, while others offer their services. On the other hand, a mysterious Miami man compels to abide by the harsh reality of their society as he lives inside the cannibal community, also known as The Bridge. He illustrates the ways of living inside the bridge as he breaks a young girl's neck, butchers her entire body, and prepares a meal out of it for his family to feed. One day, out of nowhere, Arlen suddenly feels the perplexity of her desires, of what she truly wants for her life and what she truly wants to become. She somehow perceives that she seems unsatisfied living her life inside The Comfort. Uncertain of what to do, Arlen loads her .38 caliber gun and decides to take a walk outside the safeguarding walls of The Comfort as she welcomely feels the dismal air that surrounds the desolate desert on her skin. She then arrives at a dump site where she finds a woman and a child, which happens to be the family of the mysterious Miami man from earlier, scavenging for usable scraps. Slowly and carefully, Arlen moves towards them and asks where they came from. The woman defensively avoids answering the question. Arlen becomes suspicious and accuses her of being a bridge person. The woman continues to avoid the confrontation and replies that they are just looking for plates. Arlen asks her if her kid eats people too. The woman poorly reasons out that they are just trying to survive, same as her. Her words offend Arlen and intensify her resentment towards them, and without second thoughts, Arlen shoots the woman on the head. Able to witness everything, the child who is with the woman tries to wake her up, uncertain about the reality of the situation. After seeing the child's reaction, Arlen then decides to take the child inside The Comfort. Meanwhile, the mysterious Miami man suddenly feels uneasy, so he goes to look for his family. Inside The Comfort, the child finds a vendor that sells live rabbits. As Arlen notices the child's fascination towards the creatures, she pays for one of them to compensate for what she did. Arlen tries to make the child comfortable by being nice to her, but the child just stolidly gazes at her while petting the rabbit. She tries to break the ice by introducing herself, but the child seems to show less care or almost no interest at all. Unable to contain her emotions, Arlen harshly tells the child that nobody cares for her anymore, and she could have just left her in the desert. The child then looks at her. As Arlen stares at the child, she suddenly softens, changes the topic, and asks if she likes the rabbit and wishes to keep it. And at last, the child responds with a nod. On the other side of the community, the mysterious Miami man arrives at the dump site and finds his woman lying lifeless on the ground. Alongside is the shabby wanderer from earlier, who took Arlen to the comfort, minding his business, scavenging for usable scraps. The Miami man then calls him, shows a sketch portrait of his child, and asks if he saw her. The wanderer smiles and gestures with his hand that he wants something in return for the information. Then he suddenly poses in front of the Miami man as if telling him to make a sketch portrait of himself. In a state of disbelief, the mysterious Miami man goes for the deal and starts to sketch and finishes it within a few seconds. The wanderer smiles astonishingly while looking at the result. Then he suddenly snatches the sketch pad and writes the words, "Find comfort." On that very same day, Arlen and the child already seem to get along pretty well. Both of them prepare themselves for the street party that is set to happen at midnight. Then the night of the street party begins. A grand entrance from a man who dresses like Elvis Presley, the headmaster of a sub-community within the comfort known as the Dream, speaks to the people, telling them that they were dumped into the middle of the desert because they're bad batch, basically non-functioning members of society. Then he subsequently explains that because none of them weren't good enough, smart enough, young enough, healthy enough, wealthy enough, and sane enough for them to call them freaks and parasites of society. As the people of comfort assent to it, the headmaster concludes his speech by convincing them all that it is time to wake up and find the dream. Arlen seems to be lost in her thoughts, thinking, what is this that they call the dream? Then she notices people lining up in front of a young lady who feeds them with an unfamiliar pill. And out of curiosity, she then joins them and takes a pill. Meanwhile, in the middle of the party, the child loses her rabbit in the crowd. As the child searches for it, she ends up at a place where the headmaster is standing. He then grabs the rabbit and gives it to her. She immediately takes it back. Seizing the opportunity, the headmaster deceptively leads the child inside the dream. Arlen then notices that she's lost the child. However, her intoxication from the pill makes her lose the ability to reason. Though incapable of making a sound judgment, her subconscious mind strongly suggests looking for the lost child, which leads her outside the walls of comfort again. The mysterious Miami man suddenly approaches her. Unaware of her surroundings, she stands right in front of him, disregarding any danger, and tells him how they're all in a dark place, afraid of their kind. The following day, already sober from the pill, Arlen wakes up and notices that her prosthetics are missing. The mysterious Miami man appears before her and tells her that she is far away from the comfort, and without her prosthetics, she is unable to go anywhere. He then shows a portrait of his child and asks if she has seen her. Arlen lies and tells him that she hasn't seen the child. Naively believing Arlen, the Miami man forces to make a wager with her that he will only give Arlen's prosthetics back and take her to the comfort if she agrees to look for his child. Arlen agrees with it, and they begin their journey. At midday, a stranger on a motorcycle suddenly appears. He then tries to offer the Miami man a container of gasoline in exchange for Arlen's leg. The tension suddenly rises as both men stare at each other. The stranger decides to get ready to fight as he pulls out a long thick chain that he wears from his body. Seeing the stranger's aggressiveness, the Miami man decides to yield and hands Arlen over. He then grabs the fuel container in exchange, turns his back, and walks away in the opposite direction. Feeling triumphant, the stranger carries Arlen back to his motorcycle. Then in a split second, the Miami man takes his knife out and throws it directly towards him, delivering him to his end. Confident that the stranger is no longer alive, they continue with their journey. The night comes, and they set camp. As they prepare to settle down, Arlen tries to engage the Miami man in a conversation by bluntly asking how he became a bad batch. He goes silent for a moment, collects his thoughts, and opens up with Arlen. As the night goes deeper, they become more comfortable and closer with each other. Seizing the opportunity, she suddenly snatches the knife away from him and threatens to kill him. Without showing any agitation, he drives himself closer to Arlen, provoking her to do it. Staring at each other for a while, the mood suddenly changes from fear and hate into a bizarrely romantic moment. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, a man from the comfort suddenly appears and shoots the Miami man in the chest. The man intends to save Arlen and convinces her to return with him to comfort. Back in comfort, the uncertainty of Arlen's current state of emotion increases. Whether or not she is happy with the security and peace inside the comfort, the obscurity of her desires puzzles her. Then one day, she decides to return to the place where she left the Miami man. She arrives only to find the man's sketch pad and a bloodstain on the ground. As disappointment flashes all over her face, she brings the sketch pad along with her back to the comfort. Meanwhile, the shabby wanderer from before finds the Miami man from a distance. Seemingly lifeless on the ground, the wanderer examines his body. Disregarding any prejudices, he decides to take him under his care. Arlen then indulges herself in the Miami man's sketch pad and finds different kinds of sketches of people, animals, and plants. Later on, she finds the child's portrait she once lost at the street party and prompts a strong emotion from her, probably her conscience. She then decides to make copies of the child's sketch portrait and begins to search. She asks and shows the child's picture to the people around comfort, expecting to get information about the child, but to no avail. After spending hours of long exhausting searching, she seems to feel that all hope is lost. And finally, as she sits to rest, a group of young women from the dream suddenly walks past her and finally sees the lost child surprisingly together with them. Later on that same day, Arlen shows herself at the dream's front door. As they grant her entry, she then steps in, about to know the answers to her biggest dilemma, to find out what the dream is. The dream is a mansion complete with amenities commissioned to the Elvis Presley impersonator who was seen earlier during the night of the street party. The mansion itself is a small community of women living a lavish, much more comfortable life than inside the comfort. As Arlen enters the mansion, she discovers an institution of illegal activities. Then the headmaster arrives and makes a weird remark as he approaches to meet her. Then he continues to explain that what she sees around her is the economy of the comfort. And as Arlen listens, she gets lost in her thoughts. The headmaster notices her disposition and confronts her about not liking the place. About to answer back, she suddenly loses the right words to say at the moment. He then elucidates that it costs a lot for her to be here in the comfort. He asks her where she would rather be. Not able to answer, Arlen instead stands up and sits beside him. He continues to enthrall her by telling her that everything she has done has put her where she is right now. Then he demonstrates his wisdom by first holding a cherry tomato in his hand. He then explains that it starts as a seed, and as you take care of the garden, it takes care of you back, if you feed it, and it feeds you back. He then adds a few maxims of his statement that few things in the world operate like it, fair and square. Then he finally explains that the dream is life itself, and life is the dream. Then he concludes the conversation by accepting Arlen to be a part of their elite community. In her mind, Arlen celebrates triumphantly to succeed her sole purpose in walking in front of the dream's door, to infiltrate the mansion and achieve all the means necessary in getting the Miami man's child out of the so-called the dream. After Arlen sets her room, she goes impatiently inside the bathroom. She removes her prosthetics and pulls her gun out. Then she tells the headmaster's consort to get inside the bathroom because she feels nervous about what is about to happen. And as the consort is about to come in, she suddenly points the gun at her pregnant belly and holds her hostage. She demands the headmaster to bring the child out as she threatens to scatter his unborn child all over his walls. Without a choice, the headmaster brings the child down from the stairs and hands her over to Arlen. She then takes the child and keeps his consort hostage until she clears a path out from the dream. After all of her demands are met, they then drive outside the walls for good. And as promised, she then leaves the headmaster's consort to return home but keeps the vehicle for herself. After driving for several hours, the Miami man suddenly shows up on a motorcycle approaching them. The child rushes towards her father and embraces each other, pouring their hearts out. After their sentimental reunion, the child runs back to the vehicle, gets her rabbit, and introduces it to him. After acknowledging his child's gesture, he then decides to go back to the bridge with her. Arlen stops them and asks if she can tag along. Hearing it in disbelief, the Miami man brushes her off and suggests that she needs to go back to the comfort. He continues to explain that there is only death for her in this place. She then shows her determination to stay, and without a word, Arlen grabs to hold his hand. The child then tries to break their intimate moment and suddenly demands spaghetti. Not knowing where to get one, the Miami man takes the child's rabbit and roasts it instead. The child cries as they feast on the rabbit. Peculiar as it is, the three are ready to transition into the next chapter of their lives, and they begin their journey by sharing their first meal as a family. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.